Alright, good morning class. I'm Mr. Johnson, and today we're going to go over a time period in America that was very influential to American people and to America's future. This was the turn of the century, 1900s, and the start of the Industrial Revolution. At this time, the industrial factories and kings of industry, leaders of industry, created huge factories in almost every big city across America, especially in the East Coast and the upper Midwest. So places like Chicago, New York, you name it, in that area, any big city had multiple factories, and the leaders became very rich and very wealthy at the expense of lower class citizens. So this is a very important time in our country and a turning point in our country, as we will learn throughout this topic. First off, I need you guys to open your notebooks and write down a few key words and the definitions as I give them to you, because you all need to understand these words and what they mean and why they are important throughout this topic as well. Alright, our first word is muckraker. Now, a muckraker is a radical that searches for and exposes real or alleged corruption and scandal, especially in politics and industrial factories and working situations. The muckrakers were very influential to the lower class citizens, because lower class citizens, which is our next word, are the class of people below the middle that have the lowest social rank or standing due to low income and lack of skills or education. This is very important to understand, so please write that down and be specific about it. The next word is high class. Now, this is a type of person that is superior in quality or degree, a first-rate citizen. This means that they were wealthy, they didn't have to work, they had other people work for them, and they enjoyed the luxuries that came with having a lot of money. The next one is wage slavery. Wage slavery is when a person has to work for the wages that he is dependent upon, bringing in food and paying the bills and having a place to live. Basically, this is what happened to all the lower class citizens and immigrants that came into America at this time. They found themselves so poor that all they could do was work in terrible situations in factories and little inconvenient jobs to just barely get enough to get by. A lot of times their children would have to work as well, and in the turn of the century there were no labor laws. There were no rules or laws against children working in a factory, or how long a person could work or needed to work, or how many breaks they got during the day like we have. So basically, you could see an 8-year-old kid working at a factory for 16 to 17 hours a day, sometimes even more, just to get enough income for their family to survive. Now, because of this wage slavery and these lower class citizens, there was a lot of alcoholism in this time frame. And our next word is food poisoning. And food poisoning, as you know, is a very bad stomach bug or virus, or you get really bad symptoms, flu-like symptoms, headache, fever, chills, abdominal pain, muscle pain, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, anything and everything that goes with being poisoned. But this is all food related. And at this time, the higher class didn't really care what the lower class had to deal with or even eat. So food poisoning would be killing these people, and they would just, the higher class or the leaders of industry would just say, oh, they have alcohol poisoning, or blame it on alcoholism, instead of really knowing what the problem was, until the muckrakers came around and actually looked into it. Our last word for today is a very important word, and it's power. Power, as described in the dictionary, is the ability to do or act. A person that is capable of doing or accomplishing something. Now that we have those key words, I want to explain power and what it meant during this time frame in America. Higher class citizens had all the power because they had all the money and they were educated, so they could do what they wanted and had free will in doing it. So they could care less about the personal hygiene of a lower class citizen that didn't have any money. They didn't care what their situations were, because as long as they got the money. So they were the highest power, and they wanted to keep it that way for a long time. And these muckrakers came in to actually investigate and show the American people what was actually happening to these lower class citizens and why they were dying and how bad their situations really were. So the muckrakers were the middlemen, you would say, the radicalists, you would say. So the most influential muckraker in that time frame was Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair was a journalist who in 1905 received, he wanted to go and do an investigation on the Chicago meatpacking industry. So he gained a $500 advance from his boss to go out and investigate the meatpacking industry and interview all the people around that area in Chicago. So when he arrived in late 1905, he interviewed meatpackers, bartenders, social workers, doctors, police officers, politicians, and other journalists. He also prowled all the neighborhoods, the stockyards, and inspected the packing plants as a first look. After the industrial leaders caught on to what he was doing, he was actually threatened to be killed. A lot of times the industrial leaders and bosses had ties with mafia and cops, and they could pay people off and have somebody kill you without anything being said, and they would get no blame. So he had to return to his home state, which is where he wrote the most influential book of the 1900s, which was called The Jungle. The Jungle basically goes over what a lower class citizen has to deal with every day. And he was so detailed within this book that it was an immediate hit with the higher class. And it got so popular that even the president, Theodore Roosevelt, read this book and was appalled by what these people had to face. His American people had to face. He had, like I said, he was very high class, and he didn't really know what was happening to the people in these industrial cities. So Theodore Roosevelt, immediately after reading this book, went and did his own investigation of industrial factories around him and other states, and proposed new labor laws, child labor laws, restrictions, and better demands for industrial factories and what they could and could not do. So therefore he changed, because of Upton Sinclair's book, he changed the industry forever and really helped out the lower class citizens become more treated as a human, and not just a slave. So they were no longer put into wage slavery. They actually made money and didn't have to work 18-hour days in complete filth. So right now we're going to take a little break. I want to see if you have any questions so far. I will answer those. So everybody's got it pretty well. Alright, we're going to read a little small portion of one chapter out of the Jungle, just so that you guys can understand what these people had to face and why this was so radical and such an inspiring book and a life-changing book. Alright, so this is just one part, and it's very detailed, so bear with me as I go through this. It was only when the whole ham was spoiled that it came back into the Department of Elizabetta, cut up by the 2,000 revolutions a minute flyer, and mixed with a half-ton of other meat. No odor that ever was in a ham could even make a difference to the smell. There was